I pulled into my driveway after 2 relentless weeks away, my body running on airport coffee and whatever scraps of sleep I had managed on the red-eye from Denver. My mother was recovering now, stable after the stroke that had stolen half her speech and nearly her life. I should have felt relief. Instead, as I stepped out of the rental car and my boots hit the familiar gravel, an uneasy silence crept over me. Savannah evenings were never this still. Even on quiet nights, the wind always whispered through the moss hanging off the oaks, or the neighbors' porch lights flickered through their blinds. But tonight, everything felt muted, frozen, as if the whole street was holding its breath. I reached for my suitcase, but I stopped halfway when I noticed it. The house was completely dark. Not dim, not quiet, dark. Like no one had touched a switch in days. That wasn't right. Lillian always kept the living room lamp on for me. She said a warm glow helped her feel grounded when her memory slipped. She needed routine, needed light. The sight of my house sitting there in dead, absolute stillness made my stomach twist. I stepped up to the porch, fumbling with my keys, my hands trembling far more than I cared to admit. Maybe she went to bed early, I told myself, though it rang hollow. Maybe Naomi turned off the lights before leaving earlier. But that didn't feel right either. I pushed the key into the lock and swung the door open. The air inside was cold, too cold. The kind of cold that settles into a house when no one has moved around in it for a long time. Then I heard it. A faint sound, barely there. A dull, rhythmic thumping. I froze. Thump. A pause. Thump. It was soft, weak, like someone striking wood through layers of exhaustion. I stepped farther in, heart clawing its way up my throat. The sound came again, this time with a muffled cry, a broken noise that made every hair on my arms rise. It was coming from below, the basement. Lillian. It had to be Lillian. I sprinted down the hallway to the basement door. When I grabbed the knob and yanked, it held firm, locked from the outside. A padlock, a heavy one I had never seen before in my own home. Thump. This one louder, panicked. Lillian. God. Lillian. I shouted her name and pounded the door with my fist. Her voice, so faint I almost imagined it, floated up through the crack along the floor. Victor? Barely a whisper. Barely there at all. The sound punched the air out of my chest. I ran to the garage and grabbed the first thing my shaking hands touched. A crowbar. I jammed it under the padlock and pulled. Metal screeched, resisting me, mocking me. On the third violent yank, it snapped free and clattered across the concrete. I threw the door open. The smell hit me so hard I staggered. Urine, sweat, damp concrete, and something sour, something that told me no one should ever be kept where the light cannot reach them. I flicked on the switch. The bulb sputtered once and blinked to life. My knees buckled. At the bottom of the stairs, crumpled against the wall like a discarded shadow, was my wife, Lillian. Her hair was matted against her face. Her nightshirt was torn, stained, clinging to her thin frame. Her skin looked gray, her lips cracked and bleeding. She shook violently, as if her bones were rattling under her skin. Her eyes lifted slowly, so slowly it hurt to watch, and for a moment they didn't recognize me. There was confusion there, fear, a hollow kind of betrayal that made my chest collapse inward. Then something like recognition flickered. Victor, is that really you? Her voice was a rasp, the sound of someone whose body had forgotten how to make words. I was down the stairs before I knew I had moved, dropping the crowbar, kneeling beside her, gathering her into my arms. She weighed almost nothing, like she had been carved down to the bare memory of who she used to be. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. My voice cracked, shaking as hard as she was. How long had she been down here? How long had she been crying out for someone who wasn't home? I carried her upstairs, clutching her tight, terrified she might disappear if I loosened my grip. I laid her gently on the couch and grabbed my phone. Dialing 911 felt like moving underwater. My fingers couldn't move fast enough. As the dispatcher asked questions, I scanned the room. Something was wrong. Everything felt wrong. Furniture slightly shifted, a cushion out of place, boxes stacked in the corner that I had never seen before. Lillian's medication organizer, which always sat on the counter, was gone. My breath caught. 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. I had entrusted Naomi with her mother's care. Naomi, who promised she would stay with Lillian while I was gone. Naomi, who assured me Mom is fine, Dad, don't worry. Where was she now? Who had put a padlock on my basement? The dispatcher confirmed paramedics were on the way. I knelt beside Lillian, brushing hair from her face as her cracked lips trembled. She whispered one thing before she drifted into exhaustion. Where did Naomi go? And in that moment, a cold truth pierced me. My daughter wasn't missing. She was hiding. The ambulance doors slammed shut behind us as the paramedics rushed Lillian through the bright entrance of Memorial Hospital. The sudden light made her squeeze her eyes closed, her fragile hands trembling in mine. She was barely conscious, mumbling pieces of sentences that made no sense, fragments of memories and confusion tangled together. I kept telling her she was safe. I kept telling her I was here. But every time my voice broke, the words came out thinner, weaker, as if my certainty was evaporating with each passing second. A nurse guided me back, her tone gentle but urgent. Sir, please wait here while the team stabilizes her. I nodded, though my legs felt like they were about to give out. I watched them wheel Lillian through double doors and disappear down a hallway that hummed with fluorescent lights. The silence that followed was suffocating. I sat there in the plastic chair of the waiting room, my hands still shaking, my shirt damp with the cold sweat of panic. I had been gone for 14 days. 14 days. And my wife, the woman who once loved morning walks and warm tea, who taught children to tie their shoes and believed every problem could be softened with patience, had been locked away in the dark like a prisoner. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense, except one horrifying possibility I didn't want to entertain. Where was Naomi? A social worker approached me eventually, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a clipboard pressed to her chest. Mr. Hayes, can we talk for a moment? I followed her into a small consultation room where a uniformed officer stood waiting. His badge read, Elder Protection Unit. My stomach tightened. Sir, I'm Officer Daniel Harris, he said, extending a hand. Can you tell us what happened tonight? My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. I told him about the dark house, the sound from the basement, the padlock, the smell, Lillian's condition, the paramedics, the empty house, the missing medication. I spoke in fragments, still reeling, but Officer Harris listened to every word, his jaw set, eyes sharp. When I finished, he leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hayes, when was the last time you saw your wife before tonight? 2 weeks ago, I said, staring at the floor. I had to fly to Denver. My mother had a stroke. I left Lillian with our daughter, Naomi. She promised she would stay at the house. And did you give your daughter any legal authority over your wife? Medical power of attorney? Financial access? Anything of that nature? No, absolutely not. Officer Harris exchanged a glance with the social worker. Something unspoken passed between them. He asked, Did your wife sign anything recently that you're aware of? Any paperwork she mentioned? Any appointments with attorneys or notaries? I shook my head. Lillian could still hold conversations, still recognize faces, but complicated documents were already beyond her. She barely remembered which cabinet the coffee mugs were in some mornings. She wouldn't sign anything without telling me. She couldn't. The social worker's voice softened. Mr. Hayes, based on her condition, it is possible your wife has been neglected for several days, maybe longer. The degree of dehydration suggests extended lack of access to water. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. I swallowed hard. You're telling me she was down there the entire time I was gone? We can't say for certain yet, she replied. But her condition is severe. Before I could respond, a nurse stepped into the room. Mr. Hayes, your wife is stable for now. She is dehydrated and malnourished, but responsive. She keeps asking for your daughter. My heart sank again. Lillian always trusted Naomi, always saw the best in her, even when I couldn't. I thanked the nurse and followed her to Lillian's room. She lay under a thin blanket, IV lines running from her bruised arms. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard the door. Victor, did you find Naomi? She whispered. Not yet, sweetheart, I replied, brushing her hair from her forehead. I'm working on it. Officer Harris stood quietly in the corner, observing, taking mental notes. When Lillian drifted back to sleep, he spoke softly. Mr. Hayes, we're opening a full investigation. I'll need access to your home tomorrow. We will also attempt to contact your daughter immediately. A cold realization settled into my bones. She hadn't called me in days. She hadn't answered a single call today. And suddenly, the silence made sense in a way I didn't want it to. Officer Harris laid a card on the small table beside me. If Naomi contacts you, call me immediately. Do not confront her alone. I nodded, but my thoughts were already spiraling. If Naomi wasn't answering, if she wasn't home, if she wasn't at the hospital, then where was she? And more importantly, what had she done? Officer Harris met me again the next morning at the hospital, just as Lillian was being moved to a private room. The early sunlight filtered through the blinds, landing gently on her pale face. She seemed calmer, but her eyes still carried that lost, fragile confusion that tore straight through me every time she blinked. When she drifted back to sleep, the detective motioned for me to step into the hallway. We walked to a quiet alcove near the vending machines. He opened a small notebook. Mr. Hayes, I need you to walk me through your family situation in as much detail as possible. Start wherever you feel comfortable. I took a deep breath and leaned against the wall, the weight of the past 24 hours pressing on my chest. Talking about Naomi felt like pulling at a loose thread on a sweater, each tug unraveling something I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I'm 58, retired from being a structural inspector. Lillian is 56. She taught kindergarten for 30 years. Kids loved her. Parents loved her. Everyone loved her. Dementia started creeping in about 2 years ago. First, small things. Misplacing shoes. Forgetting recipes. Then bigger things. Wandering into the backyard at night. Asking where the bathroom was in our own house. I paused, swallowing the sting in my throat. She's still herself most days, but she needs routine. She needs stability. She needs someone watching her. That someone is usually me. The detective nodded patiently. And your daughter? Naomi. She's 33. Smart. Sharp as a new blade. Always has been. She works as a financial advisor for a private consultancy in downtown Savannah. Married 3 years ago to a guy named Adrian Cole. He calls himself a real estate strategist, but I've never understood exactly what he does. The detective raised a brow. You say that like you don't trust him. I almost laughed, but the sound died in my chest. I don't. Not really. Adrian has this way of talking, like he's always selling something, always pitching a dream, always chasing a new scheme. A flip here, a short-term rental there, a startup partnership with a friend of a friend. Nothing ever sticks. But Naomi insisted he was brilliant, misunderstood, ahead of his time. And Naomi and Lillian? How is their relationship? Complicated, I said quietly. Naomi grew up close to Lillian, but things changed when Naomi left for college. She became driven, obsessed with success, climbing ladders, proving herself. She thought Lillian was too soft, too trusting. And when the dementia diagnosis came, Naomi took it harder than anyone. Not with sadness, with anger, like something had been stolen from her. I hesitated, then continued. There were moments Naomi snapped, times when she told me she could run our finances better, times she said Lillian needed professional care instead of being at home, but she always insisted she loved her mother. I believed her. Officer Harris wrote notes quickly, his face unreadable. During your trip to Denver, did Naomi stay at your home? Yes. She told me she would stay every night, make sure Lillian took her medication, keep her company. She sounded sincere, loving even. The first week, she answered every call. She told me they watched old movies, cooked dinner together. She said everything was fine. And the second week? I rubbed my forehead, feeling the guilt settle deeper into my bones. That's when things changed. My calls went to voicemail. She told me she was busy. She sent short texts. She never let me talk to Lillian directly, said Mom was napping or confused or had misplaced her phone. Did you find that unusual? I didn't want to, I said quietly. My mother was in a hospital bed fighting for her life. I told myself Naomi had it under control. I trusted her. She's my daughter. Officer Harris snapped his notebook shut. Mr. Hayes, I need to ask this next question carefully. Have there ever been concerns about your daughter's financial decisions? Any pressure, debts, or unusual behavior? I stiffened. Are you implying Naomi might have done something to her own mother? His tone was steady. I'm not implying anything. I'm collecting facts, but I need you to be honest with me. I hesitated longer than I meant to. Naomi is ambitious, sometimes too ambitious. She likes money, she likes control, and she likes being the smartest person in the room. But she's not cruel. At least I never thought she was. The detective held my gaze. A padlock on a basement door is not an accident. His words felt like a punch through my ribs. Before he could say more, my phone vibrated. I pulled it out, expecting a hospital alert. But it was a name I hadn't seen in days. Naomi. A single text. Dad, I need to talk to you before you hear anything else. Please don't call the police. My breath froze. Officer Harris leaned closer. Mr. Hayes, what did she say? I stared at the screen, my pulse roaring in my ears. She said she knows. I did not respond to Naomi's text. I could not. My hands were shaking too hard to type a word. Officer Harris read the message over my shoulder, his expression tightening into something colder than concern. Do not answer her yet, he said. Whatever she wants to say, she can say it with me present. But before I spoke to my daughter, I needed to understand what I had come home to. I needed to know how deep the rot went. So after Lillian fell asleep again, I left the hospital and drove back to the house that no longer felt like mine. The morning sun revealed details I had been too shaken to notice the night before. Dust on surfaces that should not have had dust. Thick silence that felt unnatural. A faint smell of bleach near the kitchen sink. I walked through each room slowly, afraid of what I might find. The living room looked tidy at first glance, but something was off. A vase Lillian loved, usually on the fireplace mantel, sat on a different shelf. A framed photo of us from our 25th anniversary was turned face down. The couch pillows were arranged strangely, as if someone had moved them and then put them back without knowing exactly how they belonged. In the kitchen, the absence hit me like a slap. The medication organizer. It was always there. Always. Morning pills in the left container, evening pills in the right. Lillian's dementia routine depended on it. Without it, time fell apart for her. But the counter was bare. My throat tightened. I opened cabinets, drawers, tore through the pantry. Nothing. It was gone. Then I saw the papers on the dining table. A stack of mail. Bills that had not been opened. A bank envelope that had been torn open and left half hanging. Inside was a statement I had never seen before. A withdrawal slip. $10,000, removed 3 days after I left for Denver. My pulse grew louder. I entered my office next, flicking on the light. The small safe where we kept our emergency documents sat crooked, its door not fully closed. I bent down and opened it. Papers were missing. Pension records. Insurance forms. Our original mortgage papers. Tax documents. All gone. My hands trembled. I could barely breathe. But none of it prepared me for what I found in the basement. I forced myself back down those stairs, gripping the rail as if descending into the truth itself. The stink was worse now that I was fully conscious of it. A stale mixture of human need and fear, soaked into cold concrete. In the corner where Lillian had been lying, I noticed something I missed before. Scratches on the wall. Long, desperate marks carved into the paint. There must have been dozens of them, some deep enough to reach the plaster. The realization crushed me. She had tried to claw her way out. My knees weakened. I touched the wall gently, imagining her trembling fingers dragging down that unforgiving surface, begging for someone to hear her. Nearby lay a small piece of her fingernail. I shut my eyes, fighting back the kind of grief that makes the world dim and distant. How long had she cried before the strength left her voice? Upstairs again, I wiped my eyes and forced myself to keep searching. I had to find out what Naomi had done. I noticed Lillian's small tablet on the coffee table. Naomi often helped her use it to watch old teaching videos or simple memory games. I pressed the power button. The lock screen appeared, but there was no lock. Naomi had disabled it. Her profile was still logged into an email account. My heart pounded as I opened the inbox. The first message was from a notary office I had never heard of, dated 9 days ago. It confirmed an appointment and included scanned documents. Medical power of attorney. Financial power of attorney. The signatures were shaky, uneven. Lillian's handwriting, but altered, guided, manipulated. A cold wave spread through my chest. I opened the next file. A bank withdrawal authorization. Then another. Then a wire transfer confirmation for $90,000 to something called Meridian Bridge Holdings. I frowned. That was not a company I knew. I searched the name. The results showed a newly registered financial entity in South Carolina. Listed agent, Adrian Cole. My breath left me in one violent exhale. Another file. This one, a series of screenshots of messages between Naomi and Adrian. The accounts are ready. Once Dad comes home, we are done. She is getting loud. What if she remembers something? She forgets fast. Just a few more days. Don't. Talk to her. Let her sleep. Another file. A video clip. Hands shaking, I pressed play. Naomi filmed herself while talking to Adrian in the background, unaware the camera recorded. If Lillian talks to Dad, it's over. She kept calling for him. She won't stop. I can't let her mess up the timing again. Again. The word sliced through me. It meant this wasn't the first time. I slammed my hand on the table, breath shaking. At that exact moment, the front door opened. I turned. Officer Harris stepped in with 2 other officers. They paused when they saw the expression on my face. "What did you find, Mr. Hayes?" I pointed to the tablet, voice cracking. "Everything." Detective Harris took the tablet from my hands as if it were a live explosive. His eyes moved quickly across the screen, each scroll deepening the furrow between his brows. When he finally looked up, his voice carried a heaviness that told me everything I feared was true. "Mr. Hayes, this is premeditated. All of it." I felt my knees wobble. Premeditated. The word did not just sting. It carved a hollow space inside my chest. Another officer, a younger man with tight curls and sharp eyes, stepped forward. "Sir, we need to search the entire residence. Are you comfortable staying here?" I nodded, though nothing about this felt real. They moved through the house with gloves and cameras, photographing every drawer, every document, every scratch in the basement. The house suddenly felt like a crime scene from a show I used to watch late at night, except this time there was no commercial break, no actor playing the victim. This was my wife. And my daughter. Minutes later, Harris called out from upstairs. "Victor, come here." I walked into Naomi's old bedroom. What had once been a colorful space filled with college posters and childhood keepsakes was now unnervingly empty. The closet doors stood open, shelves bare except for a few wire hangers. The drawers had been cleared out. But on the desk, someone had left a file folder. On the cover was a printed title, Travel Itinerary. Detective Harris put on gloves before touching it. Inside were printed confirmations for 2 one-way tickets to Buenos Aires. Departure, 4 days from now. No return date. Another paper confirmed a long-term rental agreement for a furnished apartment in Palermo, a trendy district in Buenos Aires known for tourists and expats. Under the signature line, Adrian Cole. My heartbeat grew erratic. They were going to leave. They were not just stealing, they were disappearing. The second officer opened Naomi's laptop from the nightstand. The device whirred to life. He clicked through folders with practiced speed. He stopped suddenly. "Detective, come look at this." Harris leaned in, and I followed behind them. On the screen was a spreadsheet titled Account Transfers. The numbers made my stomach drop. Dates, amounts, routing information. Naomi had withdrawn far more than the $9,000 I saw on Lillian's tablet. There were multiple transfers, 30,000 here, 40,000 there, 3 transfers of 20,000, totaling more than $170,000, all sent to various accounts connected to Meridian Bridge Holdings, Adrian's shell corporation. Another tab revealed something worse. A list labeled Offshore Allocations. Panama, Belize, Cyprus, Argentina. Detective Harris exhaled sharply. They planned this for months, maybe longer. Then he clicked a folder labeled Insurance. Inside were scanned applications for life insurance policies in Lillian's name. Policies neither of us had ever discussed. Each listed Naomi as the sole beneficiary. My chest tightened so hard I had to brace myself against the desk. Naomi was not just stealing. She was positioning herself to profit if her mother died. A death that could have happened in that basement. Detective Harris turned toward me. His tone was careful, but firm. "Victor, your daughter and her husband were preparing to disappear permanently. They almost did." A sudden knock on the front door made all three officers stiffen. Harris gestured for one to open it. Two uniformed officers stood outside, breathless. "We just finished the sweep of their apartment in Midtown," one said. "They're gone, cleared out, but we found more." A small folder was handed to Harris. He opened it, and his eyes darkened immediately. Inside were remnants of shredded papers, pieced together by the officers. Even in damaged form, the contents were unmistakable. A printed email confirming a secured storage locker in Miami under Naomi's alias. Another email from a real estate agent in Buenos Aires discussing a possible cash purchase of a small property. A reminder for an appointment at a passport office in Atlanta for expedited renewals. They planned to leave everything behind. Their home, their jobs, their lives. All in exchange for stolen money and a future built on betrayal. Harris walked toward me slowly, his voice steady. "Mr. Hayes, we're issuing national warrants now. Border Patrol, airports, seaports, every major checkpoint will have their faces within the hour. They cannot get far." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your early return may have saved your wife's life." The weight of that truth settled over me like a storm cloud. If my mother had not recovered as quickly as she did, if I had stayed even 3 more days in Denver, Lillian might not have survived the darkness they left her in. And Naomi, my daughter, would have vanished into another continent with blood on her hands. I stared at the officers, at the house, at the broken pieces of the life I thought I knew. "God help us," I whispered. "What has she become?" 3 days passed in a blur of interviews, paperwork, and grim updates from Detective Harris. Every morning I woke, hoping this nightmare would untangle into a misunderstanding, only to be reminded that there is no misunderstanding that explains a padlock on a basement door. By the 4th day, a nationwide alert had gone out for Naomi and Adrian. Then, at 6:14 inches the morning, my phone rang. "This is Harris. We have them." For a moment, I could not speak. I did not breathe. I stood completely still in the kitchen, gripping the counter as if the slightest movement might shatter the fragile reality holding me upright. Where, I finally managed? Arizona. They tried to cross into Mexico through a remote checkpoint using forged travel documents. Border Patrol flagged them immediately. I closed my eyes, letting the information sink into the hollow place inside me where disbelief had lived for days. "They are being held until extradition arrangements are completed," Harris added. "You may want to fly out to identify them, but the process can proceed either way." I did fly out. I had to see them with my own eyes. I had to understand what kind of people my daughter and her husband had become. At the small Arizona detention facility, officers led me through a stark hallway with beige walls and humming fluorescent lights. My boots echoed far too loudly. When I reached the interview room, a small window revealed 2 figures sitting handcuffed at a metal table. Adrian sat slouched, eyes darting nervously. Naomi sat upright, staring straight ahead, her face pale but composed. Her hair was tied back, her usual professional polish gone, replaced by something harder, emptier. When the officers opened the door, she looked up. "Dad." One word. Small, trembling, almost childlike. But I refused to step closer. The agent asked them to confirm their identities. Both did. I signed the papers. And then, because my heart was still foolish enough to need it, I asked the question I knew would cut. "Why? Why would you do this to your mother?" Naomi looked at me with eyes I barely recognized. Something wild and desperate flickered there. "You do not understand," she said. "You never understood. I was trying to fix things." Fix things. Those 2 words twisted something deep inside me. Before I could respond, Adrian leaned forward, breaking under pressure like a flimsy beam in a storm. "It was not just us. We were not alone in this. It was her idea. Naomi is not the mastermind. You have to believe me. Naomi shot him a look so sharp it could have sliced bone. Adrian, stop talking. But he kept going, voice shaking now. There is someone else. Someone who planned everything. Someone who pushed us. Someone who knew how to get the accounts, how to forge documents, how to hide money offshore. We are not the only ones, Mr. Hayes. You have to believe that. The room tilted slightly, as if the floor had shifted beneath my feet. A third person? Another accomplice? Naomi hissed through her teeth. Shut your mouth. Adrian slammed his cuffed hands on the table, rattling the metal. It was Melissa. Melissa Grant. She helped with everything. She set up the accounts. She taught Naomi how to use the apps. She forged signatures. She threatened us if we backed out. You think we planned the escape on our own? She did all of it. Melissa. A name I had not heard in years. Naomi's childhood friend. Brilliant with computers. Restless. Sharp-tongued. Always pushing boundaries. She had vanished after high school, moving in and out of states, rumored to have been involved in some cyber schemes. Naomi had once said they reconnected briefly years ago, but I never thought anything of it. Now I felt cold, creeping into my bones. Detective Harris later told me that the revelation changed the entire scope of the case. Melissa Grant had a criminal history tied to digital fraud and identity manipulation. She knew how to erase trails, forge documents, crack financial systems. If she was involved, then the conspiracy was far deeper than a daughter stealing from her mother. Over the next few days, investigators traced transactions following digital breadcrumbs Melissa had tried to bury. Offshore accounts suddenly made sense, the forged notary appointments, the misdirection with multiple shell corporations. But the biggest shock came a week later. Melissa was found, not in the way anyone expected. She had boarded a flight under another name, trying to reach Eastern Europe. But a glitch in the passport system flagged her alias. She was arrested before she reached the boarding gate. When Harris called me with the update, his voice carried a mixture of triumph and gravity. Victor, this is no longer just a case of financial exploitation. This is organized conspiracy. Melissa orchestrated the offshore transfers. She manipulated your daughter and her husband. But Naomi made conscious decisions. She is fully accountable. I sat in my living room after the call, staring at the blank television screen. For the first time since everything began, the truth settled in completely. Naomi was not just misguided, not pressured, not confused. She had chosen this. She had chosen to lock her mother in darkness, chosen to steal every penny meant for Lillian's care, chosen to run, chosen deception over decency. And even if Melissa had manipulated or encouraged her, Naomi had walked into the fire willingly. There was no saving her now. The legal storm was only beginning. The months that followed felt like moving through a world underwater, where every sound was muffled and every breath was a deliberate effort. Lillian's condition stabilized physically, but mentally she hovered in and out of clarity like a candle fighting a draft. Some days she remembered my name instantly. Other days she looked at me as if I were a kind stranger. Through it all, she never stopped asking softly, almost innocently, "Is Naomi coming today?" I never had an answer gentle enough. The criminal proceedings moved forward with brutal efficiency. Melissa was extradited from New Jersey, where she had been held after her attempted escape. Adrian and Naomi were transferred from the Arizona facility to the Chatham County Detention Complex back in Georgia. The press began circling almost immediately, hungry for the spectacle of a daughter accused of imprisoning her own mother. I ignored every call. Detective Harris remained steady through the storm. He kept me informed of each upcoming hearing, every filing, every new piece of evidence uncovered by the forensic team. He never sugarcoated anything, which I appreciated more than I could explain. By January, the pre-trial hearings began. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The air hummed with a low buzz, a mix of whispering spectators, shuffling papers, and distant murmurs from hallway conversations leaking through the doors. I sat in the second row behind the prosecution, hands clenched, waiting for the moment the deputies brought the defendants in. Adrian entered first, shackled, eyes downcast. Melissa followed, defiant and unmoved. Naomi came last. Her face was pale, thinner than I remembered. She scanned the room slowly until her eyes found mine. For a split second, something flickered there. Shame, perhaps, or fear. Or the ghost of a daughter who once clung to my leg on her first day of kindergarten, begging me not to leave. But it disappeared as quickly as it came. The judge called the room to order, and the proceedings began. The prosecution laid out the charges with chilling clarity: elder neglect, unlawful confinement, financial exploitation, forgery, insurance fraud, conspiracy, multiple counts of fraud over $10,000. Everything they had touched became evidence of their greed. Melissa smirked once when her charges were read. Naomi stared at the table. Adrian wiped his eyes. When the time came for testimony, the prosecution called me first. I stepped onto the stand, swearing to tell the truth. My throat tightened, but I pushed through. I described finding Lillian in the basement, her condition, her confusion, the missing medication, the padlock, the stolen documents, the bank transfers, the video recording on her tablet. How my daughter's voice in that clip had chilled me more than anything else I had ever heard. The defense tried to poke holes in my statements, but there were none to find. Facts do not waver. Lillian was brought in next. She was frail, wrapped in a soft blanket, her eyes wide with fear. She tried so hard to speak clearly. She tried to answer the prosecuting attorney's questions. But her memory tangled everything, turning simple answers into broken threads. At one point, she looked at the jury and said with heartbreaking sincerity, "I just wanted Naomi to make soup with me again." She said she would help. The courtroom went silent. Her neurologist testified after her, explaining how trauma speeds cognitive decline, how fear rewires the brain, how isolation damages someone already vulnerable. The jurors listened with clenched jaws. Then came Adrian's testimony. He did not try to hide his involvement. He admitted forging documents at Melissa's instruction. He admitted receiving and moving funds. But he painted Naomi as the emotional core of the operation. According to him, Naomi initiated the idea to seize financial control. Melissa only made it all possible. Melissa's attorney objected repeatedly, but every objection came like a desperate splash against a rising tide. When Melissa took the stand, she was cold and composed. She denied everything. She claimed the evidence was fabricated. She accused investigators of planting information. But when the prosecution presented logs linking her devices to the offshore accounts, her expression finally cracked. Then it was Naomi's turn. She chose to testify despite her attorney's visible discomfort. She stood, took the oath, sat down, and the moment she opened her mouth, the entire courtroom leaned forward. "I did not want to hurt my mother," she began. "I was trying to help our family. You do not understand the pressure. You do not understand how hard it has been." Her voice trembled, but it sounded rehearsed. The prosecutor approached slowly. "Miss Hayes, do you remember sending this message? She will forget. This confusion helps. Or how about this one? She kept calling for Dad. If she tells him anything, the plan collapses." Naomi's jaw tightened. She looked at me with something that resembled desperation. "Dad, I was scared. I panicked. I thought I could fix everything before you came home." Before I could speak, the judge cut in. "This is not a conversation with your father, Miss Hayes. Answer the question." Naomi's shoulders sagged. "Yes, I sent them." The prosecutor did not let her breathe. "Is it true you locked your mother in the basement?" Naomi's eyes glistened. "I did not want her to get out. She wandered. She could have hurt herself." "Is it true you removed her medications?" "I needed to reorganize them." "Is it true you planned to flee the country?" No answer. "Is it true you intended to leave your mother unattended until someone else found her?" She closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "A mistake does not take 14 days, the prosecutor replied. After 3 weeks of testimony, closing arguments, and hundreds of pages of evidence, the jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Sentencing came 2 months later. Adrian received 9 years. Melissa received 14. Naomi received 12. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like a final fracture in something already broken. I sat there, breath shallow, as deputies led my daughter away in handcuffs. She glanced back once, lips trembling, as if searching my face for forgiveness. But all I felt was the empty space where trust used to live. Spring crept quietly into Savannah the following months, softening the air with warm breezes and blooming azaleas. But inside our home, time felt heavy, stretched thin by the weight of what remained. Lillian's condition worsened slowly at first, then all at once. Some mornings she woke up humming the same tune she used to sing while watering her garden. Other days she looked through me as if I were a shadow drifting across her wall. She stopped asking about Naomi as often. Eventually she stopped asking at all. It was not clarity, it was erasure. A quiet, merciful erasing of the daughter she once knew. When her neurologist explained the change, he said it gently, like someone delivering a truth softened by compassion. Trauma reshapes the mind. It chooses what to keep and what to let go of. Sometimes forgetting is the brain's last act of protection. I tried to hold on to normalcy. I prepared her meals, read to her, sat beside her during the quiet afternoons when the light came through the curtains just right. But there were moments when grief hit without warning. Moments when I would glance at the empty chair across from me and feel the sharp sting of knowing it would never be filled again by the person who once sat there with laughter in her eyes. Naomi was gone. Not just a prison. She had been gone long before that, carrying herself farther and farther from us with each choice she made. The realization carved itself deeply into me. You can love someone with your whole heart and still not be able to follow them into the darkness they choose. Financially, the road was brutal. The stolen funds were gone. The offshore accounts, once uncovered, held nothing but digital dust. Our home, once fully paid off, now carried the weight of new loans and medical debt. I had to hire a full-time caregiver to help me with Lillian when her memory slipped beyond what love alone could anchor. But I kept my promises. I stayed. I showed up. She never sat in darkness again. Every few months I got updates about Naomi, behavioral reports, work assignments in the facility, eligibility for early programs. I never visited. I never wrote. I never answered her letters, not because I wanted revenge, but because I no longer knew who she was or what part of her was left to reach. One evening, while I helped Lillian into bed, she looked up at me with eyes soft and clear for the briefest moment. "Thank you for staying with me, Victor." Her voice was faint, but in it I heard the echo of the woman she once was, the woman who held my hand through every storm life ever threw at us. I kissed her forehead and whispered that I would never leave. And I meant it. As I turned off the lamp beside her bed, I paused in the doorway, letting the light settle across her peaceful face. A thought rose slowly in my chest, painful yet true. Some betrayals break families. Others reveal what was broken long before. But the lesson I learned was this. Trust is not a given. It is a promise renewed every day through actions, not words. And when someone breaks that promise, when they twist love into leverage and vulnerability into opportunity, the consequences will rise like a tide they cannot outrun. Naomi chose her path, and justice chose her in return. As for me and Lillian, we continue forward, not perfect, not unscarred, but together. And in the end, that is the only justice that still matters.